Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Rocco Million Live with Real Progressives. Um, Today, first I just want to say, I'm just a regular person. I never claim to be an expert in any one thing. And the good thing is our operational reality is simple logic that anybody can understand by simply diving into the material. And so I'm just a regular person like you and me trying to participate in our democracy. I'm trying to participate in our democracy. It's our civic and moral duty to participate in our democracy. That's the only way democracy even works. I took a pledge when I went to the Navy, and I pledged to uphold and protect the Constitution, to protect our social contract with our socially owned government, the Constitution. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And the only way you can effectively participate in our democracy is if you understand the simple logic of our operational reality, MMT. And that's why I'm so grateful and so thankful for the visionary that Steve Grumbine, our founder, really is. I mean, this is a guy that saw a need and he filled it. He went out and filled it. He created this awesome organization, Real Progressives, that is the true north for the 99%, represents the 99% first and foremost. This organization that focuses on the simple reality, the simple logic of our operational reality, because all problems in our society are rooted in economics and they have their macroeconomic remedies. And so that's why Real Progressives is so vital to affecting real economic and social change in our society. Only through the knowledge of our operational reality can we avoid and reject the scare tactics that make us accept and get on the hamster wheel of life, where our own actions are counterproductive to progress. When we understand our operational reality, the simple logic of our operational reality, we're not, it's like an inoculation against the lies, the mainstream lies and scare tactics that are used to keep us divided and fighting against our own interests. That's why this is so vital, so important. That's why we say MMT is the revolution, because it unites all sides in solidarity with simple logic for the public purpose, first and foremost, as mandated by our Constitution. So please, we need people. Please donate to Real Progressives. Donate your money, donate your time. If you don't got money, we need people to volunteer. We need other live streamers. We need video editors. We need writers. We need tech support. We need a ton of stuff to get this message out and to affect true economic and social justice. Please, embrace your civic and moral duty to participate in our democracy. Please, learn the simple logic of our operational reality. Please join Real Progressives, donate to Real Progressives, help Real Progressives to spread the word, to unite the masses for the public purpose, first and foremost, as mandated by our Constitution. So anyway, last night I tried to do this stream and I didn't do too good because I'm not an expert. And I kept forgetting stuff and going in circles, and my internet kept breaking out. And, so I want to do this tonight. I want to do it again right now without fumbling over my words, without forgetting my place, because this is such vital information. And, we have to, talk about it. As a real progressive, as I watch and listen to the mainstream narratives that we were all brainwashed with from birth, my mission becomes clear. Learn economics, learn the simple logic of our operational reality, learn the non-ideological description of our operational reality, and then that destroys the mainstream lies and scare tactics that were specifically designed by the ruling class to keep us divided and fighting against our own interests. That's what we do at Real Progressives, day in and day out, and not just on the internet. Real progressives are committed to real economic and social justice in every part of our lives. All right, when we hear the mainstream lies and scare tactics, we immediately interject the simple logic of our actual operational reality, wherever we are, to destroy those lies and scare tactics. We don't care if you call us uncivil or lazy or radical. We don't care, because it's our civic and moral duty to expose and describe the incivility and brutality, to describe the systemic abuses that make up our status quo, making life a dog-eat-dog world for the 99%. And that's not civil. So when these people in the mainstream talk about we need civility, they're talking BS. Real Progressives wants to talk about civility. Great, let's talk civility, but let's do it using our operational reality as a lens instead of ideological fantasies to try to talk about and solve problems. That's what Real Progressives wants. You want civility? Great, we want civility. But it's not, the status quo is anything but civil. If you're more offended by the words that I use than by the horrible reality those words describe, then it's you that has the bad position. It's you that, has to defend in that position, and when I destroy that position with, that plants a seed of truth, and, and eventually will break through the walls of cognitive dissonance. Because when I first destroy your previously held positions and beliefs with simple logic, that's a violent thing. You have a visceral reaction. Your brain takes defensive measures to protect yourself from going crazy. Once you find out that your previously held positions and beliefs are not only wrong and counterproductive, but they're actually evil and inhumane, then you would go crazy. So the brain tries to protect itself with cognitive dissonance, and it doesn't want you to think about that stuff. You feel sick to your stomach. You want to punch me in the mouth, but the simple logic of our operational reality defeats that with, because it's simple logic. All right. It plants that seed of truth. And the more times people are forced to confront the actual reality, the actual operational facts, and take the position and then defend that position, that's what ultimately will start to break down the fantasy delusions that we tell ourselves to sleep easy as evil is conducted in our name on a systemic level. That's the whole thing. We have to make people confront the horrible reality, the incivility of our status quo. And when they tell us that we need to be civil, they're really just what they're really saying is they don't want to pay attention to glaring systemic abuses that make life uncivil for the majority of Americans. That's the real problem. We all want civility, but, so that's the thing. If you're more offended by the words that I use than by the horrible reality those words describe, you're the one that got the bad position. You should have to defend that position. And if you take an immoral position, you deserve socially shunned, ostracized, ridiculed. That's how it works, Don't get mad at me for describing the systems of abuse that radicalize so many people. Get mad at the status quo that makes my words reality, and then work to fix that reality. You don't fix atrocities by looking the other way and ignoring it. That's not how, that's how we become indifferent to human suffering and death. And then we use the mainstream lies and scare tactics to rationalize it all, to accept the unacceptable. So, Now, when I use the simple logic of our operational reality, it destroys those lies, myths, legends, and scare tactics, and forces people to re-examine their previously held beliefs and positions, and then justify their positions. And so that's what eventually destroys the fantasies that we tell ourselves to rationalize the brutality of the status quo. And that's what will defeat our cognitive dissonance and wake us up and unite us in solidarity. Our operational reality smashes cognitive dissonance with seeds of truth, seeds of logic. Operational reality, seeds. With simple logic, anybody can understand once you think about this stuff thoroughly. That's the good thing it is. But because I have a lot of nifty sayings and things that I try to use to summarize this stuff, sometimes a lot of stuff gets lost in translation. And, I automatically assume people know what I'm talking about, and maybe they don't. And so, I'm going to try and talk about a specific experience, a real experience I had that, the more I think about it, perfectly illustrates the points that I'm making in a different way, in real time, and so yesterday I had to go to the VA, and I had a driver to DAV, to Disabled American Veterans. They sent a driver to pick me up, to take me to Pittsburgh, over an hour away. The driver announced he was a Trump Republican, and he has a degree in economics. I was actually delighted, but he thought that I would be mad. But I knew that it was going to give me something to talk about the whole ride. But he kept saying also that he didn't want to talk about politics, because we had to be civil, and he didn't want to argue. I kept trying to tell him, we don't have to argue. I'm about the Constitution. Do you like the Constitution? And then then he would keep talking about politics, and so I would. And he kept reverting back to the mainstream lies and scare tactics that keep us divided and fighting against each other. And he kept reverting back to the mainstream narratives to justify the status quo, to become indifferent to the human suffering that status quo creates. And so I had to keep interjecting the simple logic of our operational reality to destroy his little fantasy land, with simple logic. And, and I did just that. And so we're going to talk about it. And I planted the seeds of truth, and eventually they will overcome his cognitive dissonance. I hope, because at the end he did seem a little more receptive. But that's the way this goes. But anyway, so this DAV driver, he starts off. He says, I don't know why you guys you leftists hate capitalism. It's the rich who create the jobs. Without the rich, there are no jobs. Well, I don't know why you would hate the hand that feeds you. And so this is a huge one, a big lie and scare tactic used by the ruling class to get us to, be divided and fighting against each other instead of, uniting in solidarity for a seat at the kitchen table. So this is something we always have to interject the simple logic of our operational reality to defeat. And that's exactly what I did. The fact of the matter is, the money doesn't grow on rich people. Rich people cannot create permanent jobs. The rich can invest all they want into their business. They can make the very best product in the world. If people if they have no disposable income to buy their products, that they're going to go out of business every single time. That's just a fact. Only a balanced economy created by our government can sustain the spending and sales necessary for a productive and thriving economy. The trickle down bullshit narrative of the rich create the jobs and the rich are the job creators is a lie and scare tactic to keep us divided and fighting against each other, to keep us punching down, to keep us scapegoating the poor, instead of looking at the oligarchs who create the systemic problems that create the poor people in the first place. That's the whole point of this. And trickle down economics is so easy to, bust up with simple logic. Again, when you tell them, hey, I thought you said you took economics in school, sir. Yeah, I thought you understood that Congress had the power to purse, sir. I thought you understood that, a consumer-driven economy, a capitalist economy runs on cells. Only a balanced economy where people have money to buy production it can maximize the capacity of our economy. When we spend money at the top, you give tax breaks to the rich, the so-called job creators. You can give them all the money in the world. Why would they expand if they can't sell their production? It doesn't matter how many tax breaks you get them. If they can't sell their production, they're not going to invest money to expand their business. It's that simple. That demand doesn't trickle down, it travels up. When we instead guarantee the jobs at a bottom income distribution, because they make up the largest segment of society, the more dollars they have, the more they demand and guarantee the jobs at a skilled and educated above them. Simple logic. Demand travels up. It doesn't trickle down. In other words, when you give money to the living wage jobs, to the people at the bottom, they have money to buy the production of the skilled and educated above them. They have immediate needs that they can now fill and the skilled and the educated above them will fill those needs. That's how you balance a consumer-driven economy. Everybody's happy. The people have money to buy the production of the top. So it's illogical to think that we can somehow give more money to the 1% who already have the majority of our money anyway, and they're going to create more jobs. It's insane. The bottom line is, and this is what I tell everybody, if we have unemployment present, it's always because our socially owned government made a decision not to create dollars by law from thin air, to buy up that unemployment and maximize that productive capacity, rebuilding our crumbling communities. It's always on our socially owned government. The capitalist, so I told him I don't hate capitalists. I don't hate capitalism. No capitalist is mandated by the Constitution to provide for the general welfare. That when there's a problem in our society, you go to our socially owned government, because that's who is mandated by the Constitution to provide, to mint and tax from thin air, to provide for the general welfare and common defense thereof. So, the thing about this is federal taxation creates unemployment. When government imposes tax on us in the private sector, now we're instantly unemployed. We're all willing to sell our goods and labor for dollars so that we could survive and pay our tax and stay out of jail. All right. So that's the thing. And when government does that, so taxes ain't about government taxes ain't about funding the federal government. Taxes are about driving the demand for the dollar. All right. Government imposes tax on us in the private sector, creating unemployment. Now government has people that it can provision society with all the real resources it needs to satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare. Things like a military or infrastructure. They can provision society now using paid employment. So that's all it is. Taxation and spending is just a social construct. Dollars are just a law to satisfy tax. All right. We can't run out of laws, so we can't run out of dollars. It's only real resources that constrain us. The dollars, the money, is just how we organize, distribute, and utilize the real resources of our whole nation. Taxation and spending is just a means of production to move real resources from us in the private sector to the public sector for the general welfare of society, per the Constitution. And so that's the whole thing. So the money part of the equation is always infinite for our government. All right. The only thing that matters is our government makes the necessary investments into our society and productive capacity to ensure that we have enough real resources produced and created and available for purchase with any future spending. That's the whole deal. So it's government's job to maintain the general welfare of society. A socially owned government is mandated to provide for the public purpose and let the individual make what they can from the balanced economy that creates. Our socially owned government's never supposed to work for the private purpose of the individual and for society to make do with the scraps. That's fascism. That's trickle down. That's bullshit. That's the government is working for the profits of the 1% over its mandate to the general welfare. That's horrible. And so the thing about this is, every job in America, if it pays dollars, it's dependent on the federal government. All right. Rich people don't create dollars. Only the federal government can create dollars. And so every single paid job is dependent on government already. Government taxation creates the unemployment, and only federal spending can satisfy that condition with paid employment. Even private credit is denominated in dollars. And so when it comes down to it, it's always up to the federal government. If there's unemployment present, it's because our government wanted that unemployment present. All right. And then you got to ask yourself, why would it be in the best interest of our society, the general welfare, for our government to intentionally, force people to be unemployed and poor? It would never be. That would be horrible, especially when you consider that our communities are crumbling across America. And we're forcing millions to be unemployed and poor by targeting 5% unemployment. That's sadistic. That's artificial scarcity that kills millions. That's not civilized. You want to talk about civil? You want to have civility? All right. That's not how you get it. And so, that's what I told him. I said, it's the economy, not the rich people. A balanced economy creates the sales necessary for a productive economy, for a thriving economy. And he goes right back to the what's comfortable for him: scare tactics and lies that allow him to rationalize and justify the unjustifiable. He goes back. He starts saying, now, nothing to complain about. The economy is great at full employment. Why would you be complaining, Rocco? We're at full employment right now. He was saying, I told him, I said, and he also said, and I have a degree in economics, mind you, because I told him I studied a little bit of economics. And he said, well, I have a degree in economics, and we're at full employment. Why would you complain? And so I laughed and I said, well, guess what? I'm a high school dropout. But guess what? The simple logic of our operational reality can be taught to anybody. Anybody can understand this stuff. It's not complex. Economists like to make economics complex to obfuscate the reality, the simple reality, because they don't want people to understand what's possible. Because then they would demand that their socially owned government satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society. So they don't want you to understand. They don't want you to have that knowledge. That knowledge makes the ruling class irrelevant. And knowledge makes all their billions and all their bribes irrelevant. All right? Because then we can unite in solidarity. And when a working class is united in solidarity, we can force our socially owned government to do anything. And the ruling class can't say shit about it, because if the majority don't work, there's no society to even rule. Okay? No matter how fascist and corrupt our government is, we always still socially own our government. So right now, we collectively accept our government working for the private profits of the 1% at everybody else's expense. And the big way we do that is by targeting unemployment. And people not only accept it, but they defend it. And they never even stop to even think about what that means. Like this guy here, he starts saying that people just don't want to work. They're just lazy. And they would rather get a $200 paycheck instead of a living wage job. I told him, I said, nobody would rather have a $200 paycheck instead of a living wage job. Okay. And if they did, If somebody really would rather live in abject poverty and make $200 and live on $200 a month instead of having a living wage job and a ladder out of poverty, that person has a mental disability, and they're eligible and qualified for disability anyway. And so we shouldn't be punching down on those people anyway. That's the last person that is responsible for the state of our democracy. Again, you go to the socially owned government when there's a problem with your society, because the government is mandated to provide for the general welfare, to promote the domestic tranquility. That's a fact. These are operational facts. And so I told them, when we target 5% unemployment, I don't care if every single worker has the best job skills and every single worker has the most motivation to work. If our government is targeting 5% unemployment, we're going to still have millions of people forced to be unemployed and poor. That's not a question of personal responsibility. That's a question, that's a systemic issue, systemic abuse that we have to correct. And you could have all the personal responsibility in the world. Again, if every single person had all the personal responsibility in the world, it wouldn't make a difference. If our government targets 5% unemployment, we're going to have millions of people unemployed and poor. And targeting 5% unemployment also gives a buffer stock of unemployed to the capitalist class, which they use as a weapon in a class war against labor. This is how they drive all labor wages down. This puts downward pressure on all labor wages and working conditions. Now your boss doesn't even have to give you a raise because they have millions of people outside who are unemployed and so desperate they'll do your job cheaper than you for starvation wages. Okay, that's why ever since both parties teamed up and killed the full employment policies of the New Deal in the 70s, our wages have been stagnant from the 70s, while productivity and corporate profits and cost of living are sky high, at record highs. That's deliberate. That's not by accident. That's our socially owned government is engaged in class warfare. It's engaged in wage suppression against the 99%, against labor. And that's not civil. That's not how you get civility. When people can't eat, when people are forced to be poor and people are starving, civility goes out the window. And, life becomes cutthroat for us people at the bottom. We have to deal with that. My car's been shot up. I've been in a house that's been shot. I have friends that have been shot. You wouldn't believe it. And people don't understand this stuff because they're not exposed to it. They're not on the fringes of society. They don't see it as clearly as I do, because I experience this shit and I see it happening to other people. The perfect example is when that girl got medically raped in my town for marijuana, and they did a physical exam after physical exam for 5 hours looking for weed. She had vaginal tearing, and everyone in my town became indifferent to that suffering. They had to rationalize and say, oh, well, she must have just been a bad person. She must have been hanging with the wrong person. Oh, she was with a black boyfriend. Maybe that's it. That's what we had to say, because it was in the front page of the paper. She brought a federal suit, and the court said the police it's completely legal. If they think you got weed, they can do that to you for 5 hours and give you vaginal tearing looking for the weed. I mean, that's insanity. That rape somebody over a flower. Because guess what? Put yourself in their position. You end up in the hospital and you get a doctor putting his hands inside you over and over and over again, when they know after the first examination and x-ray you have nothing. All right, this is nothing short than torture. They're trying to get you to give up information so that they can inflict more civil asset forfeiture and more police terror to ultimately stay operational, because they're starved of funding. That one more place, the federal government is dropping the ball. It's not fulfilling its mandate to the general welfare of society. The government can fully fund all police departments today with a simple congressional bill. And then police wouldn't have to rely on policing for profit to stay operational. And then we wouldn't be setting up this scenario for, us versus them mentality there. It's all counterproductive. That's why this is so important to keep explaining. But I got off topic. I was talking to him, and I told him about the unemployment thing, and he got really mad. Now he goes right back to what he's comfortable with again: lies and scare tactics that are designed to keep us divided and fighting against our own interests. And again, he says, well, people could just work more jobs. It doesn't matter that both parents have to work. There's nothing wrong with working. You could just work 2 and 3 jobs and work your way out of poverty, and anybody can have a chance at the American dream. And again, I couldn't let him off the hook. I had to keep him on. What do you mean? Even if every single person tried to do that, there simply wouldn't be enough living wage jobs for everyone. This is just a fact of targeting unemployment. You got to understand that. Don't ignore that fact. You're going back to the personal responsibility argument. And it doesn't matter how much personal responsibility the people have when systemic abuses are in place. You're going to have unemployment, and it's going to bring down everyone's quality of life. You're going to have starvation wages, and both parents are going to have to work full-time jobs, and they still probably gonna have to live on the black market, so crime goes up. Their kids are vulnerable to gang violence, drug addiction, all kinds of stuff because they have no parental supervision. The government is privatizing the public space and cutting public spending, so there's no educational services, no safety net, no mental health, no health care services for the poor. All these factors contribute to having no civility at the bottom. This radicalizes people on a massive scale. So, even when you're talking about that guy that ran onto the baseball field and sprayed all the Republican lawmakers, okay, that's nothing. That pales in comparison to the millions that are made to suffer and die needlessly and pointlessly with artificial scarcity. And that's status quo. That's every day. and we don't see no marches against artificial scarcity that kills more than all wars combined. In fact, artificial scarcity is the main driver of wars and calamity and violence and addiction. That's why this is so important. And that's not the government's job is to promote the general welfare, is to promote domestic tranquility. That's not doing it. And so I told him again, there's only 2 positions you could even have here. Either you accept that our socially owned government keeps that, targets unemployment and keeps that buffer stock of unemployed for the capitalist class to wage war on labor with and make the 99% a precarious class, or you advocate our socially owned government, use the power of the purse granted by the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, to mint and tax dollars by law from thin air to buy up all unemployment with a federally guaranteed living wage job for every single person who wants it. In humbling communities across America. Of course, only government can maximize that productive capacity, because only government is mandated to mint and tax for the public purpose, for the general welfare. And so, if government taxation does create unemployment, this is how government forced us to stop living off the land and start working for the general welfare of society per the Constitution. This is how we got military, roads, infrastructure, all that stuff. So, it's sadistic for government to create this unemployment and then force millions of people to be unemployed without spending the dollars into existence that are required to satisfy that condition with paid employment. And it's even more sadistic when you understand that there's work all across America that's not getting done right now, needing done. This is work that's essential to the general welfare. Think about poisoned drinking water, collapsing bridges, understaffed schools, understaffed elderly care, understaffed, all of this stuff. This is work that's essential to the general welfare of society, and it's not getting done because there's no profit motive in it. But guess what? Once we understand reality, the government never needs profit. The government needs results. The government's mandated to satisfy the general welfare. So government doesn't have to concern itself with profits. Government needs to concern itself with results. It needs to constantly be investing in our society and productive capacity to keep ensuring that enough real resources are created and available for purchase with any future spending. That's government's job. That's the general welfare of society. And people that rail against big government need to understand that. Without government, nobody has a paid job. Without, freedom is a social construct too, that only exists with institutional laws and, socially owned governments that protect the rights of everybody, for the public purpose. That's the only way we have freedom. If there was no government, then it would be the laws of the strongest and the fittest would survive. They would just take what you have. There would be no freedom for you unless you were the strongest and the fittest. And that's why, government is so important. That's why our social contract, the Constitution, is so vital. And we have to understand the simple logic of our operational reality so that we can come up with solutions and we can not fall for the lies and scare tactics to keep us on the hamster wheel, being counterproductive to our own progress. And so I told him, if you really want to do that, you really want to provide a ladder out of poverty for people, if you're serious, we can do that. Not the way you're saying, though, and the proof is in the pudding. Look at the status quo. That's, trickle down is not working. There has been no recovery for the 99% since the global financial crisis in 2008. Trickle down, it's voodoo economics. It leaves the bottom income distribution the first to be fired in an economic downturn and the last to be hired in an economic uptick. So that means the bottom is in a permanent recession depression. They're always in pain at the bottom. And that drags everyone's standard of living down because people that can't eat, civility goes out the window and society becomes violent and dysfunctional for everybody. And that's, so that's the opposite of government's mandate. Government needs to instead balance the economy up front with a federally guaranteed living wage job for everyone who wants one. This would make first of all, maximize our productive capacity in a green, sustainable way that allows every single person in America a chance to derive good benefit, a chance at the American dream, like is guaranteed by the Constitution. And, a federally guaranteed living wage job would make the minimum wage the living wage without a mandate to the private sector. So, these libertarian-minded, right-wing-minded people should love this aspect. They hate government mandates. Well, guess what? The federal job guarantee is perfect. We don't even need a minimum wage at all. We don't need a minimum wage law. Our government can institute a federally guaranteed living wage job program for everyone who wants one and buy up all the unemployed people that the for-profit markets and capitalism and the private sector didn't want. These are unemployed people. These are people that weren't wanted. So government can buy them all up. And now, in order for the private sector to attract labor from that federal job guarantee program, now they have to beat the living wage job program. They have to beat the living wage and the working conditions, or else they simply can't attract a labor workforce away from the job guarantee program. It's that simple. So it revolutionizes the private sector. It revolutionizes the business model. capital would be forced to truly value labor, or else they won't be able to attract a labor workforce away from the job guarantee program. And I told him, if you love America and you love our Constitution, you should love democracy. And the federal job guarantee promotes democracy. It's actually synonymous with direct democracy. If the federal full employment offers more collective bargaining power than any union in history. Okay, when you have more jobs and people available, then we have to outbid each other. When we have more jobs and people available, the businesses have to outbid each other for the available labor. Our wages rise. But when it's the other way, when our government targets unemployment, now we have to compete with each other. And so we end up working for starvation wages, because there's more people than jobs available. That's bad. Government, that's the whole thing. So this would restore democracy. It would give people a federally guaranteed living wage job. It would kill gerrymandering. If your city government or local government doesn't work for the public purpose, they don't treat their people right, they let their police, racially profile, they let their infrastructure be crumbling to the point people are getting poisoned by drinking water, people could simply get up and leave. They can go to a city or state government that really does care about their people. They could do that now, knowing that they have a federally guaranteed living wage job waiting for them wherever they go. And so what that does is, to the substandard city, they lose their tax base, and with it, their ability to operate, because local and state governments really are revenue constrained. They can't make their own dollars. Only the federal government could do that. So in essence, this forces local governments to work for their citizenry, or else they lose their citizenry and their ability to operate. All right, it lets you vote with your feet. Restores democracy, kills gerrymandering, kills local corruption. This is how you make America great again. The last part of that, I'm just going to say, I didn't tell him this, but it even fights for-profit imperialism by ending the employer of last resort status for the military. Okay, no longer would the military be able to recruit poor, desperate people all over. People like me would have been able to stay home with a federally guaranteed living wage job, rebuilding my own community in Newcastle in green, sustainable ways. And without people to fight their for-profit wars, our government would be forced to abandon its goals of empire and truly defend our nation's sovereignty and truly defend our people's rights against all enemies, foreign and domestic, from rogue nations to our domestic capitalist class. This would be the only way our government would be able to attract people to go to the military in the first place, because now they wouldn't be so desperate that their only option for stable career is the military, because now the military won't have the employer of last resort status. So the federal job guarantee is a revolutionary thing. All right. It's a democratic means of production that is capable of increasing just about any production that we need for the general welfare of society. So this is how government could satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare and meet everybody's base needs in the public sector for free, because government doesn't need profit or even revenue to spend and operate. And if government is paying for doctors to administer healthcare, there's no need to charge the end user. This is a public service that's essential to the general welfare in and of itself. And so that's government's job, and government doesn't need profit. Reason that government should make this absolutely essential public good a for-profit commodity. That's a great way to look at it. So if you really want to give people a ladder out of poverty, you really want to fix society, you really want to lower addiction, you really want to stop violence, you really want to make America great again, you got to start admitting the truth. You got to stop looking away when the Jews are getting led to the oven. You got to stop looking away when atrocities are happening. That's not how you stop an atrocity. You need to get people to admit the problem and talk about the issues, take a position, and then defend that position. And then when they take an inhumane position, they need to be socially ostracized, shunned, ridiculed. Really, that's how it works. That's not uncivilized. It's uncivilized to allow people, public servants, to enact laws that hurt the public purpose. Why would a public servant be afraid to go into the public? It's an oxymoron. If the public servant is afraid to go into the public, that's a good indication that they're not satisfying their mandate as a public servant to the public purpose. That's the whole thing. If lawmakers were forced to live in and amongst the conditions and people that their laws affect the worst, their laws would be a lot different. Think about if Congress was forced to survive on a minimum wage. We would have a living wage by morning. Okay, think if Congress was forced to live in the hood. Their kids were forced to go to school in the hood, in public schools with everyone else. All right, Congress would declare a public emergency so fast, the national defense emergency, and claim the powers of the purse of Congress and fully fund the public educational system throughout America as a matter of national defense. As a matter of national defense, they would make sure that every American has that ladder out of poverty, has an ability to have hope in a better future by offering a federally guaranteed living wage job for everyone who wants one. All right, because now they're forced to live and deal with the results of their policies. So now they're going to make good policies. When they don't have to be in and around and live with the results of their policies, it's easy to not think about the horrors of the status quo that you are complicit with. It's easy to rationalize away 5% unemployment, millions of people unemployed and poor. It's easy to not think about people getting raped over flour. Talk about Sharia law. It's easy to not think about this kind of stuff when that's the case. So that our operational reality, operational fact, with simple logic allows us to destroy those fantasies, those delusions, and force people to confront these issues. And like I said, take a position and then defend that position. And then that's the whole point. That's how we combat the cognitive dissonance. That's how we restore systemic hope. That's how we combat systemic abuse. All right. Don't tell me to be civil while you're ignoring glaring systemic abuses throughout our society. That's not civilized. Don't wonder. And then in the same breath, they'll say, "Well, see what your rhetoric leads to. See what your words lead to." You'll have that guy go out and kill all them Republicans, because like you're saying, they kill people. That is, your rhetoric, causes that. And I say, and no, it doesn't. The words that I'm saying simply describe the reality of the status quo. That's what causes that. and by us ignoring these systemic causes and these systemic problems and ignoring the reality of the status quo, we are ensuring that we have these negative outcomes in our society later on. When you put profit over people in society, you can't be surprised when people lose their humanity, when society loses its humanity, when people become indifferent with human suffering. That's the whole deal. People, when you beat a dog every day, you feed it gunpowder every day, that dog's going to be crazy. And it's not the dog's fault. It's the systemic factors it was forced to live under that made it crazy. So, when we inflict economic terrorism, police terror on the people, and we treat people like enemy combatants, we can't be surprised when they start to respond like insurgents. It's just common sense. It's natural. It's a natural progression of things, and that's exactly what we do. And so it's up to us. It's our civic and moral duty to, explain these things, to expose them, to describe these systemic mechanisms that create all the problems in our society. That's how direct democracy works. All right. We all have to be educated with the simple logic of our operational reality to effectively participate in our democracy. That's a fact. So yeah. And, so yeah, again, trickle down leaves the bottom income distribution the first to be fired in an economic downturn, the last to be hired in an uptick. So the bottom income distribution, because the bottom income distribution is the largest segment of society, you can understand how that's, horrible for the civility in a society. That ain't going to result in civil society. When the bottom income distribution is the largest segment of society and trickle down, make sure that they're in a constant recession, depression, constantly starving and hungry and terrorized. That's the majority of the population. You're not going to get a civil society like that. It's clear as day. It's easily combated with the simple logic of our operational reality. When we instead guarantee the jobs at a bottom income distribution because they make up the largest segment of society, the more dollars they have, the more they demand and guarantee the jobs that are skilled and educated above them. Simple logic. Demand travels up, but don't trickle down. That's how you combat the lies and scare tactics. That seed of truth will eventually get in, and then we got to keep repeating it. Yeah, this makes society violent and cutthroat for the majority. But the mainstream, they want civility. They call for civility. Don't kick out Joe Mengels or Mengele, whatever his name was, the propagandist for Hitler. Don't throw him out of the restaurant. That's not civilized. God forbid. Because really that's what Sarah Huckabee Sanders was, the propagandist that, covers for artificial scarcity and pointless austerity that kills just like bullets needlessly. All right. That's what's uncivilized. That's much more uncivilized than kicking her out of a restaurant. That's even way more uncivilized than a guy going on a baseball field and shooting down a bunch of Republicans. All right. We're talking about millions of people who are needlessly and pointlessly subjected to artificial scarcity and pointless austerity that kills just like bullets. That's what's uncivilized. That's what we need to describe. That's what we need to make them confront and address. That's where we need civility. They want civility. Great. We want civility too. Prove you want civility. We're proving we want civility with simple logic. Show me how your way, results in civility. Being your way is the status quo. And we see right now what we have with the status quo. They say, my words. They say it's my words that lead to violence and dysfunction. My rhetoric, I say it's the reality my words describe. It's the status quo that leads to the violence, this is the thing. Police here, when we treat people, this is why we can't let them ignore and rationalize the horrors and the incivility of our status quo. Okay, we can't let them change the narrative. We can't let them live in a fantasy land and be indifferent to the actual human suffering caused by their policies, caused by their unwillingness to oppose the status quo. We have to make them, deal with that. And, we must use our simple logic of our operational reality to destroy the mainstream lies and scare tactics. We must use the simple logic of our actual operational reality to force people to confront the issues, force people to take a position and defend that position. That's what kills the delusion. That's when these delusions and fantasies come apart. That's when people stop sleeping easy. That's when people start to understand how wrong they've been, how counterproductive they've been. That's how you get people like LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And me, I used to be a Republican. Steve Grumbine used to be a Republican, but we examined our previously held beliefs and positions, and we examined them through the lens of the simple logic of our operational reality, and that allowed us to grow into the people we are today. You see LEAP, law enforcement against prohibition. These are law enforcement officers, judges, prosecutors, all kinds of people that used to fight the war on drugs, who now see how counterproductive and inhumane and pointless the war on drugs really is, and they speak out on it. So cognitive can be, it's called, and the good thing is that hope is simple logic of our operational reality that anybody can understand with just a little bit of dedication, just by diving into the material, looking up the greats like Dr. Stephanie Kelton, Bill Mitchell, Dr. Fidel Kaboub, Pavlina Chernova, Ellis Winningham, looking up all that, because our operational reality, because it defeats all the lies and scare tactics that keeps us divided, this is how we unite all sides in solidarity with simple logic for the public purpose as mandated by the Constitution of the United States. This is how we do it. And to illustrate that point, look at Republican economist Mike Norman. He's running for Senate. This is a guy, a Republican, who is to the left of anybody in the DNC, to the left of Bernie, because he understands our operational reality, MMT. That speaks to the unifying power, the revolutionary nature of MMT, our operational reality. That knowledge can be used for the public purpose to help everybody in society, or that knowledge can be used against the public purpose to hurt society and only help the few. If the public doesn't understand that simple logic, that simple reality, you could bet that knowledge will be used against the public purpose to hurt everybody. And they'll get us to believe these lies and scare tactics in the mainstream that force us, that make us accept pointless austerity, make us fight amongst each other and punch down instead of blaming the root causes of problems. That's the whole deal. And that's why MMT is so vital. And think about, I was talking about the lawmakers too. Yeah, okay. Well, that's all, when they tell you to be civil, just think about that. We all want to be civil, yeah, but our status quo is not civil. They can't say be civil if they are okay with our government intention or on a systemic level. They can't then turn around and say we need civility. All right, it doesn't work like that. We need to call them on their bullshit. We need to explain how the simplest forms of our status quo are completely sadistic, completely counterproductive to civil society. They completely violate our government's mandate to the general welfare of society. We need to keep showing that. That's the only way change is going to happen. When regular people like you and me, we understand the simple logic of our operational reality, and we talk about this everywhere we go, and we force people to defend themselves and to acknowledge these things. And then when everybody's talking about it and people are outraged, things will change. Things will never change if you ignore them. Things will never change if you turn your head while they're leading the Jews to the ovens. Atrocities are going to happen. We gotta look at that. We gotta deal with the cognitive dissonance. We gotta understand that when we're forced to examine our previously held positions and beliefs, and simple logic destroys our fantasies of those previously held beliefs and positions, we're going to have cognitive dissonance. We're going to feel sick to our stomach. We're going to have violent reactions. We're going to be called uncivilized. We're going to be called radicals. We're going to be called lazy. We're going to be called communists. We got to take it for the team. We got to take it for the team, because we have a moral and civic obligation, duty to, participate in our democracy, to help self-govern ourselves. That's our job. And remember, we do not. We fight simply because we refuse to lie to ourselves. We refuse to leave our kids a future worse off without at least trying to speak truth to power, without at least trying to fight back with the simple logic of our operational reality and trying to combat the lies and scare tactics the ruling class uses to keep us divided and fighting against our own interests. I wouldn't be able to I wouldn't be able to live with myself. And you shouldn't be able to live with yourself if you don't oppose these things as well. And you don't, fight for true economic and social justice. If you don't fight for our American birthright as guaranteed by the Constitution, you shouldn't sleep good. You shouldn't feel comfortable. All right. When cops are freaking raping, robbing, and killing people legally over flowers, you shouldn't be comfortable. You should feel uncomfortable. You should feel, sick to your stomach. That's an appropriate response. You got to deal with that and work through it, or else nothing will change. It's 10 times worse if you turn around and look the other way. Remember who Jesus was. We always like to say we're a Christian nation, but we forsake everything Jesus Christ stood for, everything he talked about. We forsake it. I mean, really, and cognitive dissonance allows us to, and still we call ourselves Christians. Christians, Jesus was a socialist revolutionary who hung out with prostitutes and criminals. He fed the masses. He spoke out against greed and capitalism, flipped tables in the temple. All right. Yet we're so brainwashed in this country, we have the audacity to call ourselves Christians, while we allow our government to intentionally target unemployment and force millions of people to be unemployed and poor, and force a precarious existence upon the majority of society. And we call ourselves Christians. No, guess what? I'm going to force you to answer for that. I'm going to force you to explain that. And that's the only way we're going to get through cognitive dissonance. That's the only way that we're going to change anything. And remember, because we, the people, have all the power collectively. All right. When they get you to think you're powerless, when they get you to think government is impotent and powerless too, and they get us to think that we need the rich, we need their money, we need them, they're the job creators, this and that. We don't get progress. All right. We don't get progress. We do not unite in solidarity. We do not stand up. We do not fight back because we think we're not going to, there's no use. We're powerless. Once we understand the simple reality, now we will unite in solidarity because we know we have all the power collectively, and united in solidarity for the public purpose. We can always force our socially owned government to satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society. We can always do that. It doesn't matter how corrupt your government is. It doesn't matter how fascist your government is. We still socially own our government. All right. The majority has all the power collectively. The only reason that we accept our fascist government abandoning its mandate to the general welfare to work for the profits of the 1%. The only reason we accept that is because by and large, collectively, we believe the lies and scare tactics of the mainstream that were specifically designed by the ruling class to keep us divided and fighting against our own interests. Once we destroy them, those lies and scare tactics with simple logic, now you unite all sides in solidarity to make the rich, to make the ruling class irrelevant. Their bribes now are irrelevant. Their money is irrelevant. The rich are irrelevant. The ruling class is irrelevant. We, with the majority united, we stay home from work for one day. There is no society to rule. Okay, we can simply stay home from work one day and watch America grind to a halt without ever firing a shot. Okay, we can do that in one day and then go back to work the very next day. So it's very low risk. high reward. Just about anybody can take a day off of work to save America. And it's high reward because now we've demonstrated our capacity to organize and unite and shut shit down. Now we can simply just leverage that capability to get any demand met. And this is how every working class gain was got through history, because the ruling class never just gives us justice out of the kindness of their heart. That's not how this works. All right. We have to collectively unite and force the issue. We have to force the public purpose. That's the whole deal. We are guaranteed government for, of, and by the people, for the general welfare of society. That's socially owned government for the public purpose. That's guaranteed by our Constitution. And a socially owned government is supposed to work for the public purpose, and then let the individual make what they can from the balanced economy that creates. That's the whole deal. I wanted to say, I also told that guy, I forgot to mention this, when he was talking about capitalism and everything, and he said, first he said I was full of shit, and he said, that sounds like communist China. And I informed him, and I said, well, the fact of the matter is, and this is operational fact, capitalism only exists in the private sector, and only to the extent that our socially owned government allows. Our government owns the private sector completely with its power to impose tax and be the monopoly issuer of the only tax credit, dollars. All right. Plus it has its legislative authority too. So, nobody even owns property in America. We literally all rent. We all pay tax, just like communist China. The only free market is the black market. That's the deal. America essentially planned too. The real means of production is government, and that's socially owned for the public purpose. How government spends in taxes determines how we utilize, distribute, and organize the real resources of our whole nation for the public purpose, for the general welfare of society. He didn't like that one bit, but he kept saying I was full of shit, and I said, well, explain it. What do you mean? What don't you agree? Do you think that you own your property and you don't need to pay tax? And he wouldn't. He kept saying, well, I don't want to argue. I'm not going to talk about it. And 10 minutes later, he'd talk again. And so he said, he said socialism was evil. And I told him, well, why don't you explain that for me? Why is socialism bad? Do you even understand what socialism is? He wouldn't go into it. So I explained it for him. And I said, socialism and communism isn't a dirty word like we were led to believe in America. All right. It's not fascism. For a long time, I was brainwashed. I believed communism and socialism meant fascism. Just go off and on. All right. Well, for the longest time, I believed that socialism and communism was a bad word, and that meant that socialism and communism was really fascism, because I believed the propaganda. I was brainwashed with the lies and scare tactics that the ruling class specifically designed to keep us divided and fighting against our own interests, the public purpose. That's the whole deal, because they know if we get true democracy, if people knew their true power, and they understood our operational reality, and they knew that, Congress has the power of the purse, and they can always mint and tax from thin air to satisfy its constitutional mandate. Well, then the people would never accept intentionally targeting unemployment and forcing millions of people to be unemployed and poor. We would never collectively accept privatizing healthcare and making it inefficient and ineffective. We would never accept collectively privatizing education and making it ineffective and inefficient. We would never accept privatizing energy and depleting our natural resources for profit and poisoning ourselves in the process. We would demand, green, sustainable energy so that we don't deplete our natural resources and poison ourselves in the process. We would demand top-notch education and healthcare for everyone for free, because that's essential to the general welfare of society. We would demand a federal job guarantee to maximize our productive capacity. We would demand Congress use the power to purse, make dollars by law from thin air to buy up all unemployment and rebuild our crumbling communities, maximize our productive capacity, balance our economy in a green, sustainable way. That's how you bring down addiction, crime, disease. That's how you stop war. That's how you spread democracy too, by example. Other nations will want to know how to maximize their economy. They'll want to know how to meet their citizens' needs. So their crime rates go down, their addiction rates go down. And when people are thriving and people are in business together and thriving and helping each other and everyone's needs are met, wars don't happen. We wouldn't have all these crazy mass migrations caused by our for-profit imperialism either. Because we wouldn't have to force anything on anybody. You don't spread democracy at the barrel of a gun. You spread it by example. So that's all I got, guys. We can do this only with your help. We all have to stand up. We all have to take responsibility. We all have to acknowledge our civic and moral obligations. We have to learn our operational reality, MMT, and then we have to teach it to everyone we can. We have to interject the simple logic that MMT contains everywhere it's needed. And we have to do so every time it's needed, regardless of how we look, how we feel, what we're called, the consequences. We have to do that, so that we can affect real social and economic change. Don't let them, reset the narrative. Don't let them, make us all blind to the systemic abuses that are perpetrated in our names every day in the name of civility. Don't let them do it. We have the power, guys. Please, we have hope. All right, guys, take it easy. Thanks for joining us. Look up people like Dr. Stephanie Kelton. Again, people like Dr. Fidel Kaboub, Ellis Winningham, Warren Mosler, Steve Grumbine. Follow, join, and donate to Real Progressives. We need you. Our mission is noble. Our mission is needed, and we need your help to fulfill it, to affect real social and economic justice. Thanks a lot, guys. Peace.